Okay. I think we have everybody here.
You're unmuted now. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now? I'm unmuted.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 20th day of January 2022. Notice is sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, Waukee Journal Sentinel. Thank you. And in terms of roll call, all are present with the exception of Chair Carol Mary, who is excused, and in his absence, Brian Gallantz is chair today. And I'd like to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up is our consent agenda. I would ask that someone call out the Natural Resource Department monthly report, as there will be a little bit of discussion by administration.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda, pulling out the natural resources report.
Okay. A second?
No second.
Boltman? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Nay. So we will then add to discussion item the Natural Resources Department monthly report. So next up, discussion item, I'll go in the order and we'll do the Natural Resources C. So first up is presentation by Mr. Roback regarding our community development and education.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Paul. Thanks for the opportunity to briefly present to you what I've been up to this past year. As a reminder, my position is co-funded with the University of Wisconsin system and with Washington County. So state employee under contract by the county to primarily work with all of you, county departments, local governments, and nonprofits, doing organizational development, strategic planning, public policy analysis, staff development, community development, just a whole bunch of variety of projects, which I find enjoyable and keeps me busy. So in the committee packet, I provided a one-page summary of organizations that I work with. So it's kind of the first list there of nonprofits, including Elevate and the Germantown Chamber of Commerce, Germantown Community Coalition, Hartford Area Development Corporation, YMCA, NAMI, Ozaki Washington Land Trust, West Bend Thunder, which is a youth baseball organization in town that's new, and then two statewide organizations that have ties to our county as well. The Wisconsin Association of Homeless and Runaway Services, which is connected to the Youth and Family Project here in town, and the Wisconsin Association of Mobility Managers, which is connected to Interfaith Caregivers and the Mobility Manager component of that program. Coming up, just a couple organizations I'm working with moving forward, including the West Bend Theater Company here in town and the Wisconsin Interprofessional Committee on Divorce, which is another statewide group with connections here. Essentially, everyone that's involved with the court system regarding divorce is involved with this association, and they have an annual conference where they receive professional development. And staff development is really, I co-teach that with Carol Brolick, our Human Development and Relationships educator. The Real Colors program, which has been a great program here at the county. We've done, since we started the program in 2014, we've done over 50 workshops to over 1,000 program participants. And that's both here with county employees and with other nonprofits, local governments, school districts, businesses that are interested. This past year, it was great to be back in person again after the COVID quarantine. And so we were able to have 5 workshops here with county employees, as well as one with the nonprofit friends. We've had such great success in it that we offer now 2 workshops in the spring, 2 in the fall every year for county employees. And well as we piloted last year, a Real Colors Refresher Workshop. So for those that have gone through the program once, some of them went through the original programs in 2014 and 2015. So this workshop is designed to kind of refresh kind of what the lessons were learned in those workshops, as well as how you can apply them, learn more about and interview actually people with opposite personality traits than yourself, as well as start understanding how your personality may or may not impact how you deal with change, which all of us are familiar with, right? So we have another one of those refresher workshops coming up with ADRC next month. Local government, county executive office kept me busy last year as well. Matt Furno got me involved with a small little project regarding Samaritan Task Force. That was a very interesting project and had opportunity to present in front of all you at the county board. Jamie got me involved with the project of a series of listening sessions with the agricultural community to help the county executive understand what are the pressing issues that the agricultural community is facing in the county. And we have another one of those workshops coming up just in a couple of weeks, February 10th. And then I also last year had the opportunity to work with the health department, the joint health department with Ozaki County on several projects, including the Real Colors Refresher Workshop. And then they were working on updating their community health improvement plan for the 2 counties. And as part of that process, they had a series of listening sessions with general public, businesses, nonprofits. And so they brought me in to help facilitate those conversations. So we did 8 sessions, 4 in each county, 2 in person, 2 virtual for each round. So we had great participation, public participation in that planning process. The last thing I wanted to mention, community development side of things, and that was an ongoing project with the West Bend Community Foundation. It's actually, they're connected with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and they host an annual event called On the Table. Many of you were in this room were part of that, or several of you were part of that conversation. That's an annual event to bring people together to talk about issues that are impacting West Bend, Greater West Bend, and Washington County in general. And so the Kettle Moraine YMCA is part of the West Bend Community Foundation. Rob Johnson was kind of my lead contact there. And so I worked with him to kind of help design the questions, help train the table facilitators. The event was hosted by West Bend Mutual, which was nice, in the Prairie Center, and we had approximately 80 participants. It's kind of sometimes hard with those large events to know exactly who's all there based on people showing up the day out, which was great. But we had over 70 evaluations turned in, so that gives me a good sense of 80 was a good number estimate there. As any of you who have worked with me know that I like to evaluate every program that I do, both at the time of the event, and then also I do a follow-up evaluation to get kind of measure the longer term outcomes. And that's what I've included here at the bottom of the page. The last paragraph there is really talking about 3 main questions that I ask organizations that I work with, as far as whether or not, as a result of working with me, they feel like they've been strengthened, or that they are more strategic in fulfilling their mission, or they've had increased capacity to address community issues and opportunities as a result of working with me and going through our educational programs. And last year, 100% agreed with all 3 of those statements. Doesn't always happen out that way, but it was nice that they all did this time. I've been doing this type of evaluation since 2014, so I have a fair bit of data now with the organizations I worked with, and I'm able to track that over time. So Last year was kind of an exceptional year. Usually it's in the lower to mid 90s range, but it's pretty rare to get all of them that returned the survey to say 100%. So that's a brief overview of community development program, what I've been doing in the last past year. Anybody has any questions?
Board members? Yes, Mr. Krebs.
Could you, I didn't quite understand, what is the Real Colors Workshop?
Sure. Real Colors is a personality assessment tool that was created by the National Curriculum Training Institute. And it's a branded program. Carol Brolick and I went through training in it in 2014 to become certified facilitators in it. And it's a 3-hour workshop where the first part people go through a personality assessment. And then the next 2 hours of the workshop are really facilitated conversations about helping people understand their strengths, values, needs, and joys, and how that their personality relates with other personalities whom they work with or live with. People tend to like to apply that with their personal relationships as well. It's been embedded now here in the county. We've had 500 employees go through it. Chair Creefeld went through it as well. Many of the people behind me really helps people understand their strengths of their colleagues. Oftentimes, sometimes the personalities that drive us the craziest are really an opportunity to reflect on, well, what are the strengths that they bring to the team? And it really helps unearth those as well as effective communication strategies across different personality types.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what makes you tick, why you do why you do the things that you do sometimes.
Sure.
Kind of cool.
Okay. Yeah, other than that, it's actually pretty neat just seeing the list, of all the different stuff you get involved with, everything from egg, divorce. You got such a wide variety SWAT here, that it keeps you busy. I can see that.
Yeah, it's great to have variety. Although sometimes it's challenging. I'm not an expert in every organization I work with, which is sometimes a benefit too, that I come in with kind of a fresh perspective.
Absolutely.
And an opportunity to learn along the way.
Cool, thank you.
Mr. Krebs, if I could add, I know in the my organization, DISC, I'm sure you're familiar with DISC again. It's a similar type tool, and the value that I've always had as I too have coached people on it is what's your propensity? What's your first go-to communication style, how you embrace thoughts and ideas, and we all have them, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent. But then we have secondary traits. And knowing that as we collaborate with people, how do you then respond? Especially, if you're here presenting in a meeting and you know that there's, a propensity for the folks to have certain information or know your audience, however you want to call it. But we found that to be helpful, including when you're, building out teams, agile teams, sticky teams. You know what? Sometimes those strengths you want on it, opposites in that. But at other times, guess what? You could be too strong, and you need to understand that, and then maybe you move people off a team because of that. So, anyways, I found it to be helpful. Not real quick. When you mentioned org design, what does that entail?
Usually strategic planning. So
Okay.
Usually organizations contact me to facilitate a strategic planning process from mission development or updates, vision development, all the way to goal identification and action planning. Really, who's going to do what by when with each of those goals.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Schulte, is there any other questions for? All right. Well, thank you. Paul. Next up, there's a discussion on Chapter 172 and 179. So just a real briefer on this. This is related to enforcement for parking, boat launches, et cetera, and expanding that. So Ed, I believe you're going to give us an overview and what we're thinking.
Sure. A couple things. So just to recap, back in November, we mentioned in the discussion with Henschke Hillside and some of the changes we're doing with boat launch, our commercial boat launch, and changes in the parks. Along with the county attorney, we've taken a deep look at these two chapters and updating some of the county codes and ordinances. One example we're looking at is we no longer have superintendents in the park. We have our Parks and Trails Manager, Logan Bliss, so we'll have that reflected as well. And part of what we're looking to do is increase, I should say, our authority within the park. So right now, the sheriff can enforce. This would give the ability for the parks manager and staff to enforce just within our parks boundaries. For example, maybe there's loitering, more practically speaking, would be parking enforcement. And this came about in our discussion with Ackerman's Grove and getting increased participation out there as well. But we would want to apply it the same throughout the county parks. So the one item, county attorney's office and us have talked through it. We've made considerable progress. The remaining item, I should say, is county attorney, myself, and sheriff. We've sat down before, but we need to sit down and figure out what will be the fine or the citation amount. Because right now, the way the code or statutes are written, I'm giving an example. If we were to issue a $50 in the parks, I believe the sheriff's department would have to issue that for a parking violation anywhere in the county. And that's not where we're looking to go. That's not what we're recommending. Obviously, at the end of the day, you'll have the say on it. So the idea would be to bring that ordinance, those changes, updating, and having that authority before you next month in March. So it's kind of where, that's the quick overview.
Any questions?
I think it's probably good that we look at it. I've heard parking complaints on the different PRD boards I've been a part of, and it's, I don't know if this is, my experience is lake issues, but obviously that we're looking at it from a park issue or park-wide issue and stuff, but definitely can't hurt to update it and just really decide, give a direction to what level of enforcement we think is adequate.
And we can't, well, we can't. That's lower on a tier for county sheriff department deputies to deal with. So as far as I'm concerned, if we deputize other folks within the park system or staff that are designated to do that and trained and et cetera, that seems effective use of resources.
Yeah, we're trying to complement what the sheriff does too. And I mean, ultimately decide as a policy item moving forward. I think it's good to have that authority, they'll use it judiciously, and should it go through, we'd like to have some training with the sheriff's department in April. Again, all of this kind of gearing up towards when our season starts, beginning of May. And as far as the fine, that's something you can weigh in on.
I can guarantee you'll get complaints, right? And you'll have people, well, that enforcer, we never had this before, so why now? So to be prepared for that, as well as to the point about, training, right? So you treated me unfairly because, that's going to come next. Well, no, we didn't, sir. This is our policy and this is what violated and this is why you're ticketed, own up to it.
And part of that, just to answer that, will be, it's the training, approaching people, signage, information with that leading up. Now, it won't be an end all for that. And I think part of it too is approach. Do we initially go in for first couple of weeks to kind of educate, or is it just a hard, you're issuing the tickets? But again, we've had a good working relationship with the sheriff's department, and this would help complement that. We wouldn't have somebody there 24/7, but our parks workers are throughout the parks moving forward. And then I'll just leave it at this. When we get to the recommendation, as far as the fine, the thought is some people will be like, well, that's what I pay for parking anyway, so I'll just pay the ticket. So it's that balance of deterring. And I know there've been issues or concerns up on County Highway Z that's out of our jurisdiction. The sheriff has spoken to that. We've appeared before the PRD. So just background information for all of you.
In terms of education to consumers, could we utilize the folks that assist our seasonal employees that assist, with the what's the clean water thing with the invasive species, right?
Oh, aquatic invasive.
Aquatic invasion, meaning, if they're out there first and before we say, all right, effective, June 1, we're going to start enforcing parking, can they start socializing that? If they're out there?
I'd say yes, and we can use our website, our social media, as well as a physical presence as well.
Well, that's a good idea. We'll look at that. It's just also keep in mind oftentimes those particular employees tend to be 21-year-olds and, so they don't always have the skill sets to have conversations with adult residents. So we just have to be cognizant of that.
You are
as
an
well.
adult at 21.
Well,
Yeah. I guess
Actually, you're adult at 18.
to Jamie's point, we'll be looking at our main 5, workers and then with their manager.
Even if it's just a handout, or whatever. Again, it's about education,
a
right?
text message
Yeah.
and a ping.
It's just
You
a
are
thought.
parked in the wrong spot.
Just a thought.
The parking tickets do usually elicit the most
Yep.
unreasonable response by people who get the parking tickets, I know. Yeah. And $10 parking ticket or whatever, and, I could have just moved, could have told me I could have just moved my car, I could have moved my trailer, whatever. But no, I think it's good to have more eyes on it and to make sure that, we set that standard that parking rules are there for a reason, park appropriately, you don't have to worry about it.
That's a good point, because they certainly can call us,
Yep.
right? So that's probably more likely the strategy of you guys look for this.
Our approach will be important because, the calls are gonna come to you as well. So we'll
Yeah.
keep you informed, manage that ahead of time so you know exactly at least what our plan is on paper, but then there's everything else of how it works out at the time. So I'm confident if it's the right answer, if that's where people wanna go, working with their staff, we'll make it work in a good way.
And again, well, you know this, Don, right? It's 5% that, are abusing and requiring this for everybody, but the reality is there's a problem we're trying to solve for, and guess what? If you're part of that problem, then you pay the fine.
Yep.
Any other questions on the proposal? You said that would come back when?
We'd like it to come back to your committee in March.
Okay.
I don't know if this is expanding the conversation, but if it's parking, the question is there enough parking? You already have ideas exactly where the hot spots and where the parking issues are at each different location. Is there enough parking? Are we creating violators? Throwing it out there for the discussion.
We have the maximum amount of boat trailer parking.
Is it the maximum or the minimum? This has been a discussion at PRDs.
That's-
It's a maximum amount. They always do the maximum amount allowable through the administrative code. NR 1.91 allows for a minimum and a maximum. And we've always designed for the maximum in addition to an ADA accessible spot.
Let's make sure,
But we can
just
double
refresh,
check
the
that.
double check to make sure that we are. And can we go more than the maximum? What's the penalty for going above the maximum? Because it's like speeding. You set the speed limit, people drive what they're comfortable with anyways, so if you would take the philosophy, you should set a speed limit at the 85th percentile of what people are comfortable with. That's really the safer speed limit. Well, with parking, just because there is a boat trailer specific, maximum, is that still the correct maximum? I'm barking up the DNR here, I understand that. But if we're creating a scenario where we're just going to be issuing parking tickets on a regular basis, clearly there's a problem there because the demand from the public has not been aligned with what we're supposed to provide or what we have provided. So
Some of those
I'm
maximums-
probably in the majority of that discussion. I absolutely understand that, but I'm
I think that's a valid question. So the problem, as I said earlier, is it people parking in inappropriate spots, which is some combination, right? Or is it the over parking, so you're beyond maximum slots and now you got 5 boats that are sitting in what's supposed to be auto parking?
So it's the inappropriate parking. It's both of what we're looking for, right? If there's an obvious one would be if there's a boat trailer within a regular car parking spot, or if it's up kind of on an angle. But part of it too will be judgment, right? Is it just temporarily there because they're just waiting to get their boat pulled out of the slot? And I believe there's 17 boat trailer spots. Obviously, that's equated with the safety or allowable number of boats on the lake. So that's kind of what's being looked at.
And I'll just add, besides boat trailers, the other issues are not necessarily not enough parking, but parking in the wrong spaces or closer or blocking drive accesses. So the two examples, think a cross-country meet at Heritage Trails, where now you're, parking along the road, which makes travel difficult. We've had that issue when we have big events. And Yar is the other example. There is parking at Yar, but for those of you that have been there, if you want to park illegally closer on the road, right? Those are the ones that it's like, you can't park there. That's a driveway. You need to go park in the actual designated parking spots. So we've had that issue. So those are kind of the non-trailer related, where when we're looking at parking.
If we're talking about the education, it occurred to me, because I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a safe limit of number of boats on a lake. Do our consumers know that? I bet, well, the true boaters know it, right?
People who live on the lake know
The
it.
people who live on a lake know it, but I guarantee you, half the people that own a boat don't know that. So is that part of the education? So if you come in, do we have posted signage that, again, do we need to do that? But if we have a severe problem in one place, do we have a sign that says, per what statute, maximum safe boat limit is 22, therefore our parking is 22, and that's why it's limited. And so
We're gonna try and address that too with specific signage. Again, that won't be the end all, just to your point there. So if this would go through, to have that clearly posted, what the county ordinance is in those changes.
One of the reasons we wanted this on the discussion though is if you get a chance to talk to anybody on Little Cedar Lake or pretty much Little Cedar Lake, do so, because that will help you during this discussion touch base with what some of the residents want, or even residents maybe that own boats that don't live on the lake, and to get their perspectives as you're kind of making this decision or this discussion is happening. So do that. Good. Thank you, Ed.
right, thank you, Ed.
I look forward to a lively discussion.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so we did move out of consent agenda. So now 5C is the Natural Resources Department monthly report, please.
Sure. I just wanted to call some attention to a couple Parks and Trails updates that are loosely in here, but because I have the opportunity to do so. So the first one, I just want to let you guys know that we did have the resignation of our Parks Business Services Coordinator. For those of you that know her or have worked with her throughout the parks. So her last day will be February 4th. So we're actively working on a transitional strategy for that, but I encourage you, if you see her, to reach out or, wish her well in her new endeavor. The job market is bouncing, so that's makes it interesting, but so that'll be we're sad to see her go for sure. Secondly, and this is an update as of last night late, we have been working on, if you recall, a conservation easement over the Washington County Golf Course. And that the county board authorized with the endowment funding for the county executive to negotiate sort of what that land restriction looks like on behalf of the county board. We came a little bit to a head last night with Ozaki Washington Land Trust on an issue that I think both sides recognize is just kind of a point of disagreement that potentially is going to cause the county negotiators and the county executive and the donors and the funders to pivot and look at potentially another organization or another avenue to accomplish that land restriction. So that's where we stand. We're meeting later today to kind of talk through what those proposed solutions might be. But it's good. I think that we just realized very, very late in the game that, there was a couple of fundamental there was one basically fundamental principle that it wasn't a good fit. And that principle, just for reference, was the county wanted to maintain the ability for active and I say active, but that is a tricky word, but for a active recreational use on the property. So that's things like soccer fields, baseball diamonds, think more intensive type uses, basketball courts.
Improved uses?
Well, there was impervious surface limitations in place, but to a certain degree, yes, the thoughts around, say, like fencing as and lighting and some of those things we had kind of conceded on a chunk of the property. And so there was kind of this like, well, the donors also wanted it for public access and public development. So there's concern that wouldn't protect the conservation value. So it's in a good place. It's fine. I think everybody recognizes that it's just one of those things where, perhaps it's going to make more sense to do this in another direction where the county maintains the flexibility that it ultimately wants to maintain a public park. And so we're just looking at potentially another organization or another avenue to take because that was happening. So I think procedurally we're okay. Based on the resolutions that were passed, but we'll be asking Brad just to make sure that that's the case. But I just at least wanted you to know that that discussion was happening in real time, so.
The discussions that you have had with them, basically that's helped kind of create the rough draft of what ultimately the county would want to see as the language of the easement, correct? Or more than a rough draft.
Yeah, we're pretty, we have a working document.
So at least at this point, if they're not the right fit, you more or less have a document that you can take to whatever direction is the next appropriate direction to say that hopefully we'll be at, find the right fit.
Right.
Quicker or faster.
Yeah, and it really just came down to that point, is the county wanted, and on, in the standard zone, which it's zoned off for different regulations, so it's actually fairly complicated, but in the part over the top of the golf course, like the golf part, the county wanted half of it to be able to be developed into a park with more recreational type activities. And I use the term developed because we still couldn't, there was still facilities are still a no-go in that area. The facilities were being pushed north. But in terms of think like fields or disc golf courses, or whereas they really just wanted it to stay, as it is. And so we kind of conceded part of it and we kind of ended there with this isn't, the intent of the donors was public access and public use and, a future park. So that's kind of the position of the county executive at this point.
Well, excuse me, before I have any comments, any other committee members have any comments, questions?
Just the only other follow-up question would be is it's not quite towards the trust or the easement so much, but how is there any progress update on the donations for creating an endowment fund?
Well, yeah, so that's been what's been driving this. So we have the funders had raised, and they're keeping this close to their vest at this point. But I was told that we have a firm commitment on $750,000, and that there was funding above and beyond that, but they wanted it in the year of 2021. So we were working extremely quickly to try to execute this by January 31st so that those funders could make the donations into the fund in 2021. The transfer could occur. So there is potential that I'm told that some of those initial commitments might be in jeopardy, but that there is still a minimum of 750,000 and that it shouldn't, the fact that we are transitioning or pivoting wouldn't lose the donations. The timing is what is causing the, because they need to make those donations in 2020, some of them need it to go to a nonprofit. So then you have to kind of
Until April
re-up it.
tax to do that.
Right. I'm sorry, what?
Probably have until April tax filing to do that for 2021.
I think it's just the end of January for a look back donation.
I was told it was January 31st. So that's where they have to either put it into the fund now on kind of a hope that we execute what we said we would do, or designate it to another nonprofit. They kind of have some choices, the donors and the funders, but our lead families are really handling that. I haven't been involved in direct communication with any of those commitments.
So circling back to a little bit to Mr. Krebs' comment and your piece, I agree that the county and the family, it seems like we're on the same page of intended use of that. It's getting feet on the ground and enjoying the space, whether it's soccer, whether it's disc, whether it's golf course, whatever. We're not going to put up a housing. We're not going to put up a whatever. So I understand that, but why is this organization? What do they care about that? I'm trying to wrap my head around it because they're helping to manage the endowment fund, right? That's their principal partnership.
No, Greater Milwaukee Fund is doing that.
Okay.
This is their bread. I'm happy to answer questions about this and
I
put
can
it on a future
take that
agenda.
offline.
This is sort of a report.
Okay,
So,
fair enough.
I'd like to just kind of potentially, I can note that whatever we do, I can.
The reason why I bring it up though, and I think it's germane to this report is, so if our interest in use is incongruent with some other entity, are we going to go through the same issue if we look at another vendor, if you will, to proceed with the easement? Does that make sense?
Yes, and we are talking about that later this morning,
Okay.
there are other avenues, but I will put this on a future agenda because I do think it's relevant because you guys did kind of talk about this. But I just wanted you to know that was happening, and if you have any questions or concerns, I'm happy to talk to anybody offline about that.
Okay. Any other committee members? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move back to our agenda. And, oops. Sorry, gotta get to the right tab. Here we go. Too many things open. Okay, that concludes our discussion items, and now we're moving into our action items. First up is, our wildlife damage and abatement. So I need a motion to approve. I think there's two.
There's three.
Three, thank you.
Good morning. I've got three claims for this year. One I'll discuss a little bit separate. That's the first one, Rob Gatz. He's a nursery, and he's got 6-foot-high plastic fender fence that he's got up to minimize the damage as much as possible. He did have a buck get inside that fence and rub 6 trees this year, and that's what this claim is for. You can see the assessed damage is the first column there. $1,025 is the assessed damage on those 6 trees. And once those trees are rubbed, they're not saleable. So it's a total loss of that tree, and then they're cut off so that we don't end up paying for them a second time. There's a $500 deductible on each claim, which is the eligible claims column. And then you'll see the acres appraised, acres damaged, and then the deer damage, and then there was actually some turkey damage, but that was on one of the other ones. So Rob Gatz, he does have a shooting permit as well, helps reduce some of that damage, and if he does happen to be out there when there's a deer within the fence, he can remove that deer to prevent it from happening again. So I don't see.
Is that a year-round permit to remove the deer?
It is, yep. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't approve his claim. He keeps the fence pretty good shape, and does put the effort forth to make sure that the damage is minimized. The other two guys on the list, Gerald Schmidt and Helmut Wagner, they're both traditional crop growers. They're what we call WM40 enrollees. They've been in for a number of years and have an assessed damage higher than $1,000 most years. Neither one of these guys had any hunter denial complaints, and they met all their harvest objectives. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to push theirs through as well. Anybody have any questions on any of them?
No, all right, well, then I need a motion to approve the 3 assessed damage, was it abatement
And just damage claims.
Damage claims, please.
I'll move to approve the abatement damages.
Joe, to be a first, a second? Mr. Volkman? So the motion is to approve the 2021 USDA APHIS Wildlife Damage Abatement Program claims, 3 that were presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next is, excuse me. So this is a continuation of the fair grant, just a little comment here before we get to, I guess, a motion. So continuation of fair grant application, part of the American Recovery Act. So do we have an actual number and a motion, because we have to file this by the 28th, I believe? So there was some missing information. I just want to make certain that the motion is based upon what?
So there's an updated resolution in the packet that was put out a couple days ago. So that is a great question. So it is actually a resolution to approve, Gina maybe can help me with this, but approve resolution 2021 grant application, United States Economic Development Administration. And that, that summary is the county match up to 1.4 million if awarded.
Okay. So based upon that, I would need a motion for continued discussion. So a motion to approve that application grant.
Make a motion.
Mr. Krebs, I need a second.
I'll second.
Schultes. Okay. So further discussion.
If you don't mind, I'll make just a few comments. So we've been working on this. We have a lot of details and drawings and work that's kind of been changing very quickly, which was kind of why the packet was late. I put in front of you, and I apologize for not getting this to you in advance, but it was really kind of moving as of yesterday afternoon, and it's still kind of moving. But so what this is this is essentially a high level summary of the project cost that we are looking to apply for in this grant. This number, I think, so far has given everybody that I've talked to a little bit of sticker shock, that this project is turning out to be, that there's this much into it. At this point, though, we talked about keeping the project together as a strategy. And at this point, going into kind of the grant review and the AIS strategic planning that's going to happen, that the grant is very competitive. And so we are looking at, applying in hopes that we receive funding. And during that application, we'd be going through kind of, I think, a lot of what Supervisor Gallutz's concern was at the last meeting of really what are we looking to do? Who's looking, how are we looking to manage and run the conference center? Who's leading the conference center? And then specifically, what do we really need at the conference center? Because what we have is, if you look in the AV total, which is actually 3.1 million, which includes audio coverage, digital signage, exhibit systems, conference systems, room scheduling systems and controls. That is really, I think, we're confident that that's everything anyone would ask for, right? So we do not, at this point, we're not getting into the conversation about, do we really need that digital signage here and here and here? But at some point, I think that is the first step, A, if we receive grants, but also B, just otherwise when the county's looking at, okay, now here's the strategy, what are we looking to do on this property? But this kind of gives you a high level framework for what a renovation out there, if we really want this building to move in the next 25 years, is going to cost. And I'll also just point out that there's two things kind of behind the numbers driving this. I was told if we were ordering these products today, and just looking at the $3.1 million number, we might be looking at 2.5 million. But we are looking at supply costs, supply shortages, technology improvements, and labor costs like they've never seen before. So they actually have some fairly significant, because we aren't looking at starting in this application until 2024 at the earliest. There's some built-in inflationary price increases based on what they've been seeing, which is very, very high increases. That, in addition to what they're seeing in labor right now for these techs, is basically they've noted it's like nothing they've seen before. So they can't, this number is encompassing of the fact that labor is costing everybody a lot more, which I just think is the reality that we're in. So we feel pretty good about this number in 2024, but it's not, I mean, it's just not a cheap project. So I'm rambling now, but I wanted to just point that out to you that it would be less if we did the project today. We're not doing the project today, so we were kind of trying to look at the uncertainty, particularly for this grant application, and kind of err on the side of showing people this is the maximum that this could, not maximum, but this is kind of what this costs. So it's been an interesting process, and I think that, I've talked to a few people, the grant person we've been working with, the AIS board president, county executive, and, everybody's kind of like, okay, that's more than $1 million. So that's kind of what we suspected going into this, that this is going to be a larger price tag. The funding strategy, should the grant be awarded, keeping in mind we have lots of time on this, was essentially to review that $1.4 million at the time of the capital improvement program, so the future sales tax allocations, and prioritize it amongst other projects. So it's just one small example, but there's, for example, Fair Park has, several $100,000 already budgeted for, say, asphalt. Well, okay, we're actually gonna shift this around so that we're funding this instead of this. So that was kind of the strategy that the budget team talked about, that we would put it into the future allocations, and, we can have that discussion about exactly, where it's coming from, but essentially it's coming out of sales tax and authorized capital improvement money in the future.
So we'd be reallocating the CIP money a little differently than what we
Than the current 5-year
the
plan.
current one is.
Because the current 5-year plan doesn't have this in. So they'd be,
But there is money kind of towards Fair Park, but just different items,
not to this amount, but yes.
somewhat.
Yes, but they also talked about just how sales tax performing, what other things are happening, facilities projects in general. Basically that if we were going to leverage 5.5 million we would figure out how to come up with the 1.4 million in that plan.
Great. That, to the point is if we can shift sales tax, if the sales tax revenue is greater than what we anticipated, and we can add to that, funding, but absent that, we have to supplant something because we got a finite amount for the CIP. So what would be put on the back burner then? And that's just obviously a reality.
That one, so just to be in full disclosure, the budget team felt confident that this is not an issue in terms of what they would recommend. However, that's a policy discussion. So it's a little bit of an unknown, but essentially what this resolution commits you to is saying that this match is a priority. So, we'll have to figure that out. I mean.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, because of the uniqueness of the timing of filing, we are authorizing that resolution versus the full board.
No, well, yes, I am putting in there that in theory, this was the date of the committee meeting. It is going to the full county board, after we submit. Yeah.
Oh, so it's after the fact.
It's the county board will vote after I hit send, but if for some reason the county board does not they could do a few things. They could deny it and then I would rescind our application. Or they could change it and say, well, we like this, but we don't want to fund it this way, right? We would want to, but again, there's 2 years here. So we could also look at the scope of there's a lot of things that can transpire. So I don't want to get too hung up on, if you pull the CIP and you kind of start looking at it, I think that there was a good level of confidence that $1.4 million was not going to be hard.
So that's the overall project. So the bottom line of 5.5 million estimate today, that's inclusive of doing the work, over the next 1 to 3 years or so.
So
6.9 million.
the 6.9 million.
Sorry, 6.9.
Which is the total.
Match, yes. Sorry.
Highlights, that
Thank you.
is consistent with our timeline, which starts construction in 2024, finished in 2025.
So again, the engineering costs that we all agreed to earlier is to get an understanding what our total price, so the $7 million rounded, is that total price. Of the items that go against the ARPA, is that inclusive of the carpeting, restroom upgrades, electrical, small animal, all that? Or is that outside of the scope of the ARPA grant?
So this spreadsheet, this 6.9 million, this is exactly what we are applying for in the grant. So we're
Okay.
applying for 90,105 for engineering, 47 for project inspection, 50,000 to help us with grant administration, 31 for the AV, power for 300,000, lighting for 2.2 million. So that's a pretty big number. That's a piece of the project that we also wanted to get some background on for the facilities department as those fixtures kind of start to come end of life, what we're talking about. And we have each of these very broken down, like high levels of detail, which I'm happy to share if anyone's interested offline, of each building. What is the exhibit center? What is the outdoor area? Because there are things in this total that, we can look at. And then that interior, exterior infrastructure, that includes paint, carpet, restroom upgrades, some small improvements to the wetland buffers, fencing, electrical upgrades, small animal AC, and resurfacing the carnival area. And then one just note, and this is a problem because you can see the contingencies in there. Just in full disclosure, the architectural and engineering fees and project inspection fees shown in this grant, they did off of a $1 million AV total when they gave us this in advance. So we procured them, so we have to go with that number. But they've essentially already told us that
Their fees are going to be more.
their fees are going to be more, and those would not be eligible under the grant because of how we procured it. So that would be an issue that we would have a better handle on once we end up actually in the funding conversation. But the county would essentially be on the hook for that as well, which would still be better than having to figure out how to fund this project or what to do absent assistance.
Yeah.
And for anyone interested, it's not in this number, but the furniture out there came back at over $200,000. So that's just a note. They have all original like tables and chairs in that conference center. And that's not an eligible expense.
I know it's been a short time since, feels like a long time ago, but since last month when we talked about this. I'm assuming that much has been really discussed. It's a separate issue, but figuring out who's responsible for these replacement costs or future replacement costs with AIS or whoever uses the facilities. Correct?
Right, well, I think
you said.
there has been some conversation from the county executive side, which has said that the building infrastructure, which this is, power systems, its lines, its lighting, is the county's infrastructure. We own it, we have an agreement to operate it. And whether we want to, change that, charge them, have them, whatever we want to do. But it's our responsibility. And so the county should be paying for that, given, the operation potentially could change. So I think we landed on the county wants to and is obligated, and also AIS does not have this type of.
So it's the county's executive's position is the county should be responsible for CIP issues out there. But when I hear like furniture
Furniture is a separate conversation. I think that could be.
paint, stuff like that that's normal wear and tear. They're lucky we provide furniture to start with, I guess. So just bigger scale than, a small, whether it's a rental agreement or whatever, but I think if my memory serves me right, there really isn't a formal, there's an operating agreement, but it really doesn't, it's absent of addressing the actual CIP type responsibilities. It's not really assigned in there.
Well, I'll just phrase it another way. What skin in the game does AIS have in this?
So, well, you saw their letter of support, but in the application.
No, the ongoing to the existing expenses and ongoing expenses to Mr.
Yep, so in the application, in the preliminary engineering report, there's a whole section on maintenance of this equipment and ongoing life cycling and what that is. And it's written, and I shared this with them because I wrote it, that they have they're key on the hook for maintaining, not necessarily replacement, but the ongoing preventative maintenance contracts that accompany this type of equipment, right? So when just a projector breaks or, some of this stuff breaks down, that's their responsibility, which that's not a small amount. I know we have that with our AV stuff in the courtrooms. And in addition, they're also on the hook for, so day-to-day maintenance type stuff to care for it, but also they've agreed the language around they're looking into basically the hiring of additional resources that would care for this. And their president signed a form for me that created jobs, both on the operation, it could be high level, it could be marketing, it could be tech. We weren't that specific. But this idea that as this strategic plan goes forward and we start talking about what this would be, that this type of an investment is going to carry ongoing operational expenses that they would be, as the current operators, responsible for. So that's not, it's not 6.9 million, but it continues every single year. So that's not a small, I know right now we're just up here philosophically, they're on the hook for, operating this facility. And we're kind of saying, we expect you're going to have to, this equipment is no small joke. I mean, it's $3.1 million worth of equipment.
Great. So we're talking about initial funding and upgrade, which is, I'm trying to get the right word here. So the $6.9 million is going to benefit the county, its assets to the county. It's at a larger scale. The general daily operation of the grounds, the Fair Park and its general operations. So the daily cleaning, the carpet stains, all that, as you mentioned, the general maintenance operation, that's all by AIS.
As of today, that would be my answer. Yes.
Unless something changes.
Right.
Understood.
I don't know if it's accurate, but I'm just my personal feeling. I feel like the our CIP just, I don't think maybe we were planning appropriately for Fair Park, and that's more the county's problem than AIS's problem. And I could be wrong, but not having time to go back and look at earlier CIP budgets. I feel like the only thing we were ever doing at the Fair Park was always just asphalt and seal coating, and every now and then
Major
maybe
mechanicals.
a furnace or something, rooftop. AV lighting got just overlooked. And that's the county's problem, obviously. So it's just trying to gain my brain around catching up to what our real responsibilities
Well, and
maybe are out there.
Right, and that's why I agree. I think we own this, right? It's our property, it's our building, it's our structure. And if it's antiquated today, then we need to address that for future needs. So the question becomes, I think what I raised last time is, does this meet our projected future needs?
yes, yeah, so two quick comments. Number one is, I haven't read the PER yet because it's not in my inbox, even though this grant is due tomorrow. But I've heard anecdotally that and this makes sense, that they believe that kind of the wiring of these systems should last 25 years, right? Like right now, this is 25-year-old infrastructure, technology changes. They pretty much have to redo the control wiring type stuff to do the lighting fixtures. But that then the actual, think like light bulbs, the actual fixtures and maybe the front end projector, the front end, user interfaces have a shorter lifespan. So I think to your point, that can be a future conversation about who pays for what. Because we're applying for a grant right now with a low probability of obtaining it at a 20-80% cost share, we just thought like it didn't make a lot of sense to get into that over, a few dollars here and there right now. On your second point, can you ask the question again, the future?
Well, it does this building design, the engineering we have, does it align with what we believe our future use of the facilities are? So meaning, are we going to the 100th percentile or is this only going to the 75th percentile of what we believe our future needs are? So
Or 110.
or under that, or so will
Or
we need to
over.
have continued CIP to Ms. Supervisor Krebs' point is, do we need to revisit, our 10-year CIP plan after we do these, if we need to continue to
Modernize,
evolve the building based upon, I don't know, who knows what technology is going to be like. If you look at what's promising with AI right now, oh man, we're going to see, we're going to see a lot of, you think about the people that were born in the late 1800s and saw a whole lot of things in their first 50 years of life. You'd be amazed what's going to happen in the next 20 years of our lives. But anyways, I digress. So the point is, we don't know what's going to happen.
right.
So should we consider beyond this, or do we need to consider beyond this, the ongoing capital improvements?
Yes, is the
And
answer.
did we get some of that answer from the initial engineering, or was that limited because of the scope?
We got some ideas. We got full price lists, and we're gonna go back and make sure we have what we need. So on the whole, how is this engineered 75 to 110%? So we had one design call. Carol Mary actually participated, Kelly Boone, our IT person, our facilities person, myself. And keep in mind, the firm we hired is excellent. They're very credible nationwide. They did the Wisconsin Center improvements. They have a lot of conference center experience. And so they even say from now to 2024, the first thing they have to do is recheck the technologies, right? What's out, what's supported, what's not supported, because the products that they quoted us today probably won't be on the market 2 years from now. So they fully recognize that because that's the industry they're in. But we asked them to give us all of the data on, what this would really take to, we have permanent mounted solutions in the exhibit centers as well as like mobile capable ones. So I feel really good that 3.1 is going to get us what we're seeking out of this project, the ability to have.
Or we size the project to fit that budget upon awarding and actually moving forward on it.
Well, that's exactly what ends up happening, right? They award the grant. Now we say, okay, we have 3.1. This is how we got to that number, but this went up in price, or we're gonna, as part of the grant application, there's a design workshop, or it's really more of a design feedback workshop with the intent to invite some of the local corporations who go to conferences, some of like the 4-H, the manufacturing expos, some of our existing clientele to review kind of what's going in each room and get that feedback and make sure we're not missing anything to host these Class A conferences before we go into final design. So that check, I feel like, is appropriately built in. And then if we end up, well, now we're here, but we only have this much money, that's where then there's either size it to the grant, or it's gonna be knock, like, county, can I have another million? Or, whatever it is, there's one of two ways you can go. You can either scale back the project and cut outdoor audio coverage, right? Because that's something that's in here. But I think there will be stipulations on the grant funding if it's in the scope or not. So that's why we wanted to make the scope as comprehensive as we could.
Understood.
Mr. Schultes, any?
No, I think I'm glad to hear that Jamie described, the looking forward, and that this organization is very prepared. They understand the process that technology changes so quickly, especially. I mean, that's our I don't have the itemized spreadsheet, but that's the one of the biggest costs, I'm assuming, that whole redo of that. So I'm okay with, moving forward based on your descriptions, and it sounds like you've got things covered, and yet things are still moving. So that's a difficult place to be in.
Just a question for the eventual motion. In the packet, it says 2021 resolution. Does that need to be reflective of 2022? Even though it does say it's for a 2021 American Rescue
It
Act.
comes towards the next
2021
session.
Still in the 2021 session.
Yeah.
So it's still 2021.
Okay,
The sessions normally run like April through
April.
March, so.
all right, fair enough.
I think my comment is more directed towards the county needs to create our policy or our direction of our relationship with AIS. Do we have an operating agreement with them, or do we have like a rental agreement with
We
them?
have a management and operating agreement.
There was no change.
But I'm talking more the philosophical drive to that, or what the county's intent of that is, or how that's managed. Operating agreement, you're telling someone what you want them to do with it, and you're having them execute that. More of a rental type agreement, you're saying, I'm furnishing you the facility. You can make of it kind of what you want, as long as you're within the parameters of whatever lease terms you're coming to. So in more of a lease agreement, you agree in the beginning, this is what I will furnish, this is what I won't furnish. Anything else, it's on the tenant. Operating agreement, once you tell them what you want them to do with it, well, then also you have to give them the tools to do it. It's very similar but very different.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think from once, say we spend 6.9 million, build this all out, how is the next 20 years, 25 years really play out then for obviously audio and all that stuff will continue to change, but at the same time, just the types of use, intended uses of that facility will change. How does the county and AIS relationship continue to evolve and adapt to those different markets?
Well, I think you're onto something, because what is intended use of that property? And I brought this up in transparency with Ms. Ludovic after our last meeting, just in a passing. It's, what's the intent of convention centers? You look across, Milwaukee, Madison, Chicago, fill in a blank, right? They all have convention centers. And what's the intent? Well, I have heard, I don't know if others have, from constituents and business owners in the county that says, well, we got these wedding centers and they're interfering with my business and how I make a living. So from a policy perspective, and what's the intent of the future of the Fair Park and what its business model is going to be, I think those are all legitimate questions.
Yeah, it's complicated for sure. And that's why, I mean, I think we're hoping to drive towards some of those answers as part of the process we're embarking on. But I do want to just point out, because of your comment, that it's a yes and it's unique because the AIS is a volunteer nonprofit board composed of the HR manager at EH Wolf and Sons, and we have 2 local attorneys from 2 law firms. There is, a VP from West Bend Mutual Insurance, and I mean, the list just continues to go on.
It's hard to push volunteer people that are there volunteering to start with.
Right, so they don't make, part of that is they're not positioned, or they haven't been, and so this is a philosophical discussion, especially as operators of the Washington County Fair, right, to, carry on that activity, but they haven't really borne the same, like, we expect you to take out debt. We expect you to bear the risk of, because it's the public good argument of hosting the Manufacturing and Career Expo. Did they get their money back on hosting that? Do we care? The 400 local manufacturing firms from around the region came there and hosted 794 students from the region on, job vacancies. So, I mean, those are the types of things where it's like, yeah, did we subsidize that specific event? Yeah, probably, because they aren't taking these risks, so I mean, those are the.
Well, that's why I say, and this is more from the county board's perspective, we, the county board, need to, we understand who our client or partner, tenant, whatever they are, who they are and what they are, and how far we should or shouldn't maybe push them. It's more creating the expectation of the county internally on the county board level is what I'm struggling with or trying to figure out, and raising that for other county board members to consider. So.
Yeah, that's essentially, that is the part of the question that the county executive and the county board desires to answer, right? What is the expectation and what's the accountability?
I would like to think of them as a partner, but some of these budget discussions treat them like a tenant. So those are similar but different.
Right, and I think the accountability piece of working with EDWC is part of what we're hoping to get there, because as they put forward, you have to keep in mind it's a process, right? It's what is the first step? Okay, are we accountable to that? What is the second step? Okay, are we accountable to that? And it's my job, in theory, I'm seeing this as the representative of the county executive. They're forming the project management team on this right now. And the process, which I'm hoping involves engagement of all of you. But if not, I see that this committee is in theory going to be probably pose some of these questions of, okay, so the question we got asked last week was, this specific thing, this is the response from the county's position. Is this correct? What else are we missing? And I know Don, I mean, this is going to be a process, but that's the idea, that at the end of this, we have something that is like a playbook. Right. And it might not go as far as what you're hoping, Supervisor Gallitz.
I mean, I'm pondering.
Yeah.
Right, but to that, is it 110%? Is it 40? Right now, we really have nothing, right? So we're just hoping for, progress.
To your point, Brian, our former contract with AIS was a tenant lessee agreement, which really kind of caused a lot of the misunderstandings and kind of the, butting up of heads or whatever you want to call it. Now with the new contract, there's more realization as to what is expected. So, but it still is a process that we're working through to work with AIS and to be more of a partner in making sure that is successful Because their success is our success, and it helps everyone in the county. I had conversations with AIS recently, and what my vision for Fair Park is that people, weekends coming up, what's going on at the Fair Park? Everybody's looking to see what's going on at the Fair Park. And eventually that's where we hope that this becomes a central community hub, and that our partners are working with us, and we're making helping the quality of life for the citizens of Washington County.
Yeah, and I guess I'll leave you with that as a tainting, because it is the county's property. We are set to look out for it long term. But we have this board of ag and industry, and now there's 2 farmers. So I encourage everyone to look at it like a partnership and not like the county is in complete, I mean, it's a control issue, right? And we run into problems when, you know, the county is kind of over here making a decision, and then like, just as an example, I'm making this up right now, but the fair is gonna be 10 days. We talked about it, we decided, we think it's in the best interest, and now we're gonna have a 10-day fair. Well, okay, where was the dialogue with this so-called organization you've created to help make those decisions? And so we sometimes run into that with our elected officials or board reps on both sides of like, well, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen trying to decide about X, Y, Z. So viewing it like a partnership is helpful.
You're absolutely right. You just said it has to be, right? You know, and if it hasn't, well, that's the maturity of that relationship. For it to succeed and not have some of the issues that we've had in the past, it has to be perceived and realized by both parties that it is a partnership. So again, it goes to what is the relationship going to be? What type of legal document is that? You know, because we can find many vendors that are just going to do the daily operation of the facility, right? We can find those people out there. So the question is, are they providing input and intended use and future use that aligns with the board's county's desired use of the property?
Right.
I mean, easy peasy, right?
Well, that's the question. You know, people, they've asked me 10 times, what does the county want out here? What does the county want out here? What does the county want out here?
Everything.
And every time I answer it the same way, and I say, what the county board and the county executive are looking for is for the collective approach of the county representatives and the agricultural representatives and the industrial representatives to sit down and use the county's brain power and figure out what we want, right? The county, one person at the county cannot tell you, you know what, build X and I'm happy. Like they don't, or, you know, build Y and we're good. Like that's not how everyone's just kind of like, we want to see it. We need to have something that we're working towards. And I think there's willingness on both sides to work on what specifically that is.
Committee members, if you allow me a little digression here. So on that front, do we get feedback from key stakeholders on what that future mission is of that fair park?
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's key stakeholders within the community, business, you name it, right? And those listening discussions to be able to put forth, not in like, 2050 growth plan or transportation plan or whatever, the same should be held for this property.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I said it at the AIS board meeting this month. The town of Polk has a stake in this, and they asked me, oh, what are you guys doing? Because we are trying to plan the land uses around here, and, you know, and I said to him, I'm like, yeah, we're going to make sure you're at the table to give that input. Right. Like, so that's why, I'm going to push hard for one. That to me is the most important part, what you just articulated.
Okay. So before us is a resolution for the grant application to the United States Economic Development Administration. Any further discussion? Okay, Anita, well, we had a No, we did have a motion. It's a motion to approve. We had a first and a second, correct?
We did, yes.
All right. So again, this will be approving and going to the county board at the next available board meeting. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. I thank all of you. Our next meeting is February 24th. We are adjourned.